What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah, and today I invite you again to pull up a comfy chair, grab a tasty beverage, and something good to snack on, and let me talk at you for a minute. And the thing that I'd like to talk to you about today is this game right here. Samurai Robots Battle Royale. If you like Gunpla Models, or Gundam models that aren't the officially licensed ones, or Transformer models, or any of those types of toys, if you have a collection of those things, or if you have looked at those things and thought to yourself, you know, that looks really cool, I kind of want that, but what am I going to do with it once it's built and put together? Besides, you know, look at it and think, oh man, that's cool. If that has happened to you, as it has happened to me, because I think Gunpla models are incredibly cool. I'm not huge into the lore, the deep backstory, because, you know, when I was a kid, I want to say Gundam Wing, maybe Gundam Zero. They were on Cartoon Network at the time, so I watched them, but I've never gone, like, beyond that experience from my childhood. But I've always thought the models were really, really cool. This game gives you rules to play with those models. Kind of like the way Gaslands is to Hot Wheels, this game is to Gunpla models and even Transformer models or any kind of robot models. It gives you settings from, I think, like if it's 40 millimeters or bigger, or if it's 75 millimeters or bigger. So it can go pretty much up to whatever you want it to be as far as size goes, as long as you keep all the rulings and rules and everything else consistent. And it's a lot of fun. On top of the other, you know, the cool factor of, like, now there's a reason to buy these fairly affordable models, and you only need 1 to 3 models. So my understanding is the Gunpla range, there are some more expensive ones, but you can easily find them from the $20 to $30 and $40 range. So that's not bad for a war game. Plus the book, this book was like $16 on Amazon, or I'm assuming this website down here may also still work at ganeshagames.net. So moving into the gameplay and the mechanics of the game uses sticks. I like that sometimes. Now, one thing about it is that because the models, for the most part, usually Gunpla aren't going to be a base. Sometimes you'll have them where they're on a nice decorative like diorama, and I suppose you can still use those. But the rule of thumb that it gives you is to pick a spot. Zach and I use the back of the right foot, and that's your measuring point. No matter where the Gundam is, that's your measuring point. You go from there and you move accordingly. Medium is the default, and it gives you rankings. I misspoke earlier. It gives you a set of sticks from 25 to 28 millimeter models, and then it gives you for 75 millimeters plus. Let me double check that. No, for 40 millimeters plus. The 75 is the part I had wrong, and I had the 40 in the wrong place. So from 25 to 28, if everybody's using that, then you would use one set of sticks. If you're at 40 millimeters or more, you use the larger set of sticks. Now, regardless of whether you have 28 millimeters or 40 millimeters, because you can mix them, you always use the stick of the largest models. And it tells you exactly how long they need to be. I made mine out of some popsicle sticks that I had left over from another project. And those same sticks are used to measure your range for your weapons as well as your movement. You can, for the most part, all movement is in a straight line down the stick. You can make some special rolls, which we might talk about in a little bit, to break that into 2 turns, but for the most part, it's straight lines for everything. So in order to use the sticks at all, obviously the first thing you have to do is activate your models. The game uses 1 to 3 models. However, each part of your Gundam's body, arms, legs, head, torso, random other appendages that they might have, activates individually. So you could say I'm going to activate my legs and then move or kick or a combination of those, but you can only attack once, and you can, if you have extra abilities to activate with it, then you can make the attack more powerful, but you can't like kick him twice or shoot him twice unless you have a special ability that allows you to do that, of which there are a plethora of special rules and abilities to customize the Gundams and give them the flavor and the play style that you want them to have. In addition to that, each of your Gundams is assigned 3 dice that start as, the rules say white, yellow, and red, but you can substitute any colors that you happen to have as long as they are 3 different colors, and as long as everyone understands, sorry, my brain shut down for a second, as long as everyone understands what represents what. When you go to activate your model, you choose 1, 2, or 3 of those dice and roll them, and when you roll them, you are looking for the Q, which is the quality of that part of your body. So for example, if I want to activate my legs, we'll stick with a movement analogy here. If I want to activate my legs, I would roll, I'm going to say all 3 of my dice. And if my legs are a quality 4, for every 4 up, I earn a success. After you roll, you compare your results to a handy dandy chart. That looks like this. And it's, if you get 1 failure, nothing happens. It uses a fumble system, so similar to games like Blood Bowl, which I haven't played, but I've played a lot of it on the computer, so I understand a little bit of how that works. Where certain amounts of failure will cause you to pass to your opponent. Otherwise, you just keep activating and doing stuff until you fumble and pass it to your opponent. And then it just keeps going back and forth until everyone has activated all of their body parts, or until everyone has activated everything and then doesn't have anything else that they can do with their body parts. And at that point, you would pass the round. The game length is a very general way of doing it. It involves reaching a certain level of damage across your army, which we're going to talk about now. When you take damage, this is why you need the 3 colors of dice. When you take damage, you will have one of your dice degrade to the next color down. So if you have all white dice still, one of those would become yellow. And the white ones would continue to turn yellow. Once you had all yellows, you would start swapping your yellows out for red every time you took a damage. Every time you get a yellow dice, you roll on a malfunction table. Something bad is going to happen to you. It's just a matter of the severity of it. Once you start switching from yellow dice to red dice, the severity of the things that can happen to you escalate very quickly, because instead of rolling on a malfunction table, you begin to roll on an actual damage table. And that can get real ugly real quickly. Which brings me back to the game length, because the game length is usually, the default game length is when one player has more red dice than they have yellow dice. Full circle. It's like a circle. Now, while I think that the dice and the malfunction system and the damage system, it did take me take us a couple of playthroughs to kind of get our heads solidly locked around that. Is that it can be difficult to keep up with, especially because if the dice get mixed up or mixed around or moved around, sometimes it can be difficult to keep up with who has what damage on them. That's not really an error of the game by any means. It is a lack of bookkeeping skills on my part. I can acknowledge that openly and freely. It doesn't bother me to say it, but it is an issue that I personally have run into with the game. But it's definitely not enough of an issue to detract from the game. Just maybe if you're going to give it a go, be very, very careful about picking up your dice and then putting your dice back where they need to be to make sure you can keep up with who has taken what damage. Now that we've talked about what happens when you take damage, let's take a second and talk about the things that can happen to you to cause damage. Combat stuff. So when you activate a body part, again, you're rolling on Q. This other number right here, what would be besides C, is your combat score. All combat is worked out as an opposed roll against your opponent. You roll your dice, add your combat score to it, add any modifiers to it. Your opponent does the same, and then the two are compared. If you meet, or if you're less than or equal to your opponent, nothing happens. It's a blocked attack. Tie goes to the defender. If you, however, beat them, there's a chart, and it'll tell you how much damage each attack does. Each attack is targeted towards a specific part of the body. Most often, you are going against your opponent's torso, so it can behoove you to sink points into a solid torso score when you're building your mechs. Which the building of the mechs part we'll take a look at in a separate video. It'll be in one of those corners shortly after this video is released. But when you're looking at your card, again, you have each part of your body that you can activate has two numbers. The quality, the Q, is what you need to roll to activate it. And the combat, the C, is what you add to it as a modifier when you make an opposed combat roll against your opponent. And there are a lot of different attacks. This is the page of attacks. It's pretty extensive, and it does a pretty good job of giving you enough options in your attacks to build your Gundams to suit any type of playstyle. Melee or hybrid or heavy shooting or whatever. And you got bite, slash, grapple. You can grab their weapon, do a flyby attack. Kick, punch, slam, shoot. Tail sweeps. Throw rubble at them. There's just all kinds of sweet stuff that you can do to your opponents. And it does seem that sometimes in the beginning it takes a little bit for damage to start punching through. But once it does and you start taking those malfunctions and those damage, like stuff goes slippery dippery sideways so very, very, very quickly. And it's great because it's also swinging. Like, yes, you might do that to your opponent and you're like, okay. But then you fumble, very next thing, they're doing it to you. And then you're just like, oh. That's why we don't gloat at the table. That's why we're always considerate to our opponents, because RNG can take it all away from us. Just like that. To dig a little bit deeper, and also to point out a very crucial part of the game, is that this game is 100% WYSIWYG. Now, obviously, a gun can be represented pretty much any way, but if you're going to say that your model has 3 sets of arms, your Gundam has to have 3 sets of arms. And with that, you can activate those arms individually. Each pair of arms is a different potential activation, so you can potentially punch a lot of times. But you have to have it modeled that way. You can't just have some random thing and say it's got a whole bunch of stuff that isn't represented on the model, because the book says that you can't do that. And I agree with it, especially in a game like this where you're only playing a couple of models. You're buying Gunpla or pulling Gunpla models from your collection that you already have because you like those models and the way they look and their loadouts and stuff. And I've just recently, since I've gotten into this game, really gotten a chance to get some close-up looks at Gunpla models where I was allowed to touch them, and I didn't realize that they're snap fit. Everything can pop apart. So as you're playing, if a weapon's destroyed, you can just pop the weapon off. That is really, really, really sweet to me. I like it when a battlefield can change. You can also, if you're playing with buildings, I haven't quite figured out what scale of buildings need to be used for this. I think 15 millimeter. If you're playing with the what did he call them? There's size ratings for the Gunpla models, and I can't remember what he said we were playing. Maybe real scale. I don't remember. But anyways, they're like about 70 to 75 millimeters tall. So I'm not exactly sure what size building I need to print and use to build up a city to play with. So if you do happen to know what would be the proper size to scale the buildings to, please drop me a line in the comments and let me know. Because I've found tons and tons and tons of really cool small scale building files for other games. I don't want them to be too out of scale. And the Gunpla are, like I said, about 70, 75 millimeters tall. So I don't want it to get too extreme there. And I don't want it to be too extremely out of scale there. And you know what? I just learned something. I'm glad that I had this handy while I was talking to y'all. You can attack multiple times. You can either sync your actions into extra attacks, or you can do it multiple times. You just keep using the same action. Good to know. Good to know for future games. That's why we keep reading the books, because it's easy to miss stuff. You learn a new game, stuff happens. So I like that a lot more, because I like the idea of being able to pepper them with shots. Huh. What do you know? Can't wait to tell Zach about that one. So after a long round of shooting at each other and punching and kicking and flying and leaping and biting and charging and slamming and shooting some more, it's time to start a new round. When you do that, initiative just goes back and forth between the players. So you roll off at the very beginning of the game to see who's going to activate first, and then in subsequent rounds, the other person gets to activate first, and then back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You're still using the fumble system and fails and everything else. It's just to see who has the first activation of the round. We'll roll once at the beginning, and then pass it back and forth the rest of the game. Now, going back to what I had mentioned earlier, was talking about earlier with buildings, there are numerous rules in this book for the different kinds of buildings, which is part of the reason that I really want to get some buildings printed. But you got stuff for bunkers, dams, power plants, nuclear power plants, sports stadiums, churches, and a lot of these things will have different reactions. Like stuff will happen to affect the board or to affect your model when they stumble through it or get thrown through it or whatever happens. And I really want to see that stuff play out on the board. There's also stuff for fighting underwater. If you've got some aquatic type looking Gundams and you want to go for that. And there's also rules for just outer space combat, which is really one that I think is really neat, because you need like little to no terrain for that. You just need one of those space mats like I've seen people use for like X-Wing and maybe Battlefleet Gothic and stuff like that, and you're good to go there. And so that's pretty solid. And if you're buying the mat, you only need a 3x3. Now obviously my personal flavor is to buy a 6x4 and then section off what I need. But honestly, if I was going to buy a mat for this, I don't know that I'm not sure what game I would ever need a 6x4 space mat for. But then again, if I bought the 3x3, there would probably come the day that I did need the 6x4. And then I would have two space mats, which I don't need. That's a problem for future me. Sorry, I'm not going to eat up your time with that personal paradox. Now, we'll pause for a second, get myself together. Okay, got myself together. Now, in addition to those potential like environment things, there are several game modes that can be played. There is military science fiction, which has certain special rules that you can use and not use. But this one is going to use more of like the probably like 2mm, maybe 6mm army stands that you can move around the board in conjunction with the robots. There's the Samurai Robots, which is what I like to play. Just straight up Gundam v Gundam, let's get it mode, which is what you're going to see the majority of probably what you're going to see me and Zach playing for at least the first few games. Next one of note or on the list is Steampunk Robots, which interests me. I actually just acquired a Warmahordes collection. And you know what? Those Warjacks, I might could play this system with those Warjacks and play the Steampunk Robots rules. They're pretty tall. They're probably not, they might be bigger than 40. I don't know. I'm going to look into that. But anyways, the Steampunk Robots, there's no heavy armor. And the big thing here is that you have a steam counter. So you start at full steam, and every time you roll a double failure, you lose steam. However, you can spend 2 torso actions to regain steam. And if you're not at full steam, it makes you slow, or you may not be able to move at all if you're already slow. Slow would be the short movement widget. There are situations where the default that you start at is a medium, but you can buy upgrades that'll take you up. You can buy downgrades that'll take you down. You can also have things in-game from the malfunction or damage chart reduce your movement further. And if you're already at the short, you become immobilized. And then the last game mode that you can pick before you start your game, which I think is one of the cooler ones, is Robots versus Monsters. So robots, you got Gundam versus Kaiju, which sounds awesome. Only one person can be the Kaiju while the other person is piloted mechs, and you just go at each other trying to save, or I guess destroy, the city. But that game mode also very, very, very much intrigues me. The whole game, all of the modes, and there's also another game that they make called Mighty Monsters, and the whole thing runs on the Song of Blades engine, if you're familiar with that. I feel like I've heard of Song of Blades, but have not played it or seen it played. But if it plays similarly, if it plays similarly to this game, I would probably enjoy it. The way it was described in the intro is that in Song of Blades, you're doing the fumble system. That stuff is the same, but you're doing it for individual models. Whereas in this, the body parts of your mecha are kind of like the individual members of the warband. And I think that's a neat way of thinking about it. And I think this game is a lot of fun. I think it's a really interesting system. I love the fumble activation system. I feel like I've played at least one other game that's not Blood Bowl on the computer that uses that, but I can't remember what it is right now. But I think it's a fun system. It's just something different. It's something other than I go, you go, which is fine. I enjoy a lot of games that have that. I also thoroughly enjoy the random activation system that a lot of Warlords games uses, and I like this fumble thing. I like it. I like the chart that, tells you how much stuff you get to do based on what you roll. Now, there are times when you get into having the yellow and the red dice, if you choose to roll those, you don't have to roll those dice, but if you roll those dice and you roll a 1, then your opponents get to make reactions and do stuff, and they can like shoot at you or punch you or make a movement away from you, or they can reset their weapon systems if they had a malfunction or something like that. So it brings in a good element of decision making, like, all right, do I need a really good action myself, so do I risk this 1 in 6 chance of rolling the 1 and letting my opponent do something, which is a nice decision tree to have for yourself in the game. Again, just like I said earlier, remember to put your dice back on the sheet where they go. In some of the game modes, there is a morale system that's triggered when 50% of the mechas in a force have only red dice left, have exited the table, or are disabled, immobilized, permanently blind, or destroyed, or have their pilots knocked out or dead. When you test morale, you roll 3 dice versus the mech's quality. Each mecha tests independently or of others. And the player decides in which order you can test them. And then there are different things that will happen to you based, like in other aspects of the game, on the number of successes that you get. I have yet to play a game with the morale rules. I feel like that's something more involved with campaign games, which is the next section of the book. There is a campaign system. It is a page, so not super in-depth, so it seems pretty straightforward to follow. It does involve some repairs and gaining experience, and you can get some new abilities and things along that nature, which seems cool. And I think that at some point, Zach and I are almost certainly going to try out at least a short, some kind of campaign. We'll work out a story. Zach's big into D&D and that type of thing, so maybe he'll cook us up a good story line to play through. We'll look into that, but I haven't played that yet, so I can't comment too hugely on it. There are a few ready-made type things that you can use, I guess, for AI if you need a random, just something quick. But for the most part, when you get into this, you're going to want to build some models. So build up your Gunpla. Again, WYSIWYG to look like what they are supposed to be, which I'm not going to go all the way into here, but I'm going to talk about a couple of things related to it. So the basics are you get a X number of points. If you're playing a 1v1 battle, you would probably want to play like 600 points or something like that, with each person just having one really, really, really decked out model. If you're playing a team game, like not team with another player, but more than one model on your side, the rule is you get about either 1,000 or 1,200. We played 1,200, so you get 600 points for a leader model, and then you get 300 points each for the other two models. You can only ever have one leader in the group, period. When you build your model, you have to pay individually for the quality and combat level of each body part. So for example, if you wanted to have... I lost my page. Okay, so for example, I mentioned having a good combat on your torso is good. So if you wanted to have a torso that with a quality of a 4, so that it can activate on a 4-up, and a combat of 5, you would be spending a total of 70 points for that part of your body. And you have to pay for each part of the body individually. On the leader, it's not really that hard. But on the smaller ones, you kind of really have to make some decisions about where you need parts of the body to be good. And you kind of always want to have a pretty decent torso. And once you've got your body parts sorted out, you got to pick some special rules. So this is the thickness of the book. It's not a huge book. This much of it is special rules that you can pick from to make your Gundam unique and awesome and WYSIWYG. And there is, again, there will be a separate video for like building out where I'll show you guys like me fleshing out and building a model on paper. But there's so much stuff in here. Elbow thrusters, energy reflections, swords, wings, special legs that let you jump farther. You could be a kicker, you could be a biter, you can have tails, smoke screens, superhuman pilots, wheels, tracks. There's also downgrades, like things that you can give yourself that are flaws, kind of, so they deduct points from the total, which would then allow you to kind of maybe fit in another good rule that helps you. I love that much of the book is Gundam customization and special things that you can do to them. Now, on the downside of that, however, your first couple of games, you're going to forget a lot of your rules. But like with any game, once you know the charts, like once you know what happens on the activation charts for your successes and failures and whether or not you fumble, once you know the rules on your model, the game goes pretty quickly. Like I said, our first game took us a while. Second game went quicker. Next game will go even quicker, I'm sure. And I can't wait to play the next game, by the way. Just BT dubs. I think this is a lot of fun. I wouldn't have sat here and talked to you about it this long if I didn't think it was a lot of fun. And last thing that I'd like to say, and this is something that I will always applaud an author for and point out when and if I talk about it, and that is the inclusion of a good quick reference sheet, so that I don't have to flip through this whole book. I can look at the sheet, figure out what I'm supposed to do, get it done. It includes the damage and malfunction charts. It's just, thank you. That's well done. A good quick reference sheet will make or break my opinion of a game a lot of times. Not always. There are always exceptions and extenuating circumstances. But it matters. It matters to have that sheet for quality of life for us, the player. So all that being said, my opinion is that Samurai Robots Battle Royale is a solid checkout for both for the price of the rules, the price of the models you would need to play it, providing that you don't already have the models. Now, if you like wargaming and you like Gunpla Models, I feel like this is a no-brainer. You should check this game out. And I also want to say thanks for stopping by, hanging out with me today while I talked my way through this book. I know I tend to bounce around a little bit. I'm sorry. Nothing I can do about that one. Yeah, I just totally can't help that. But thank you for stopping by, hanging out, letting me talk at you for a little bit. I hope you learned something from this, or were able to garner an opinion of yourself, or maybe even just heard about a new game. You'll be seeing the game soon on the channel within the next, probably sometime this week, whenever this airs. Not sure when that's going to be. But within the week of this coming on, there will be at least one back report where we get hopefully not a whole bunch of things wrong. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks for stopping by, and may the dice be ever in your favor. And as always, I'd like to say a big, huge, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to our patrons who support us and pledge to us over on Patreon. You guys are the absolute best. If you enjoyed the content you saw here today and that's something that you would like to consider doing to help out the channel, go over there, check out the link in the description, check out the Patreon. There's a lot of cool stuff over there, including access to our Discord server. Talk to me, hang out with me, talk about our work, what we got going on in the hobby, some shout outs, all kinds of cool stuff. Check it out if that's something that you think you would be into. And regardless of whether or not you do that, I want you to know that I am incredibly grateful that you decided to stop by and spend part of your day with me today, rolling dice and pushing toy soldiers around. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And as always, may the dice be ever